Again, hello everyone. Glad to have you in class. My name is James McBride, and I'm your instructor. And I will announce that a few times in the videos that are at the beginning of this course so that you know that I'm James McBride and I am your instructor, and I am very glad to have you in class. That's because some of you I won't see, right? This is as much as you'll see of me. Of course, I hope you come down and, have a visit, and we could talk about different things. But anyway, let's get to the topic at hand. Remember that you're going to be taking a quiz after this and that you can use your notes on that quiz. Again, the idea is to get you in the habit of understanding that notes work, that they help focus you and focus your attention and pick out things that are important in a conversation and be able to do well. That's why I let you use them on the test, because I'm really wanting you to get this information in your head. And that's what today is about, is kind of the differences between where you've come from to where you're going to. There have always been differences between colleges and high schools and the approach of teaching. And that's because at a high school level, the teacher often is trying to get you to learn certain facts. There's a lot of facts that you're trying to learn. And then in college, it's not as much that. Sure, there are classes that are very much facts, but there's usually assignments along the way that are basically take all this information that you've learned and now let's apply it. Now let's see if you can put it into practice. I'll talk about it later, much more in depth, but that's one of the reasons why businesses, organizations that are going to hire you want you to have at least a 2-year degree, because you've gone through the process of having to take a set of information, digest that, and then incorporate that into a solution. Because no matter what you do, no matter what you decide to do in your life, you will be doing that for businesses. Some of you, of course, have already done jobs and you realize that that's true. They give you some information to start off with and they're like, go do it, go take care of this. That's why you're hired. Take care of whatever you're supposed to be doing. Even if, right, you were just flipping burgers at McDonald's, there's certain processes you have to learn and there's certain problems that you have to take care of. As a matter of fact, working in fast food industry is a great thing to put on your resume. Because it shows that you've had to deal with people, stressful situations, all those things that businesses and organizations are looking for. In any case, we're going to start off and start taking a look at this information here, the differences between high school and college, to try to help you transition. Now, I'm aware that every, so often I get students that they've got a lot of experience and they're coming back to get retrained to go do something else. So they're very aware of this situation. Good for you. That'll just make this information easier for you. So this is a page that is right there in Canvas that you can go and look at, and you should look at before you take the actual quiz. Don't just trust what you picked up on your notes. Review the information, see if you missed anything on your notes, put it on your notes, and then go take the quiz, right? Okay, so let's get started. The differences between high school and college. When you look at this information, you may think, well, why is there a difference? Shouldn't it be the same? And again, no, because in high school, there's facts that they're trying to teach you so that you can build into something else. I had this student once in my 103 class, and she'd come in and complain about the fact that she had to take this math class. And it was so stupid, and it's just wasting your time. And then we started talking about other things, and it finally got around to, how was high school for you? And, oh, it was so a waste of time, and it was so stupid. And then so finally I asked her after we talked for a while, I said, well, how did you learn to do everything that you're doing in this math class? Oh, well, I took this in high school. It's like, yeah, and you took it in junior high and you took it in grade school. No way you can walk into a college math class and pass any of it if you've had no math, right? It's building on things. And so at high school, they have different things that they need to teach you, and they do that in the most efficient way that they can. But there also has been changes, and I've found over the years that this has become a bigger problem. As a matter of fact, I didn't talk about these things in this course, say 10 years ago. It wasn't needed, but it is needed now. So let's dig in and take a look. So really what I've done is sum this up at the beginning, and then we're going to dig into it a little deeper. So the high school situation typically, right, in a typical high school, you're going to go in and listen to the instructor, to the teacher, and that's lecture. And then they're going to usually do worksheets. So you're going to hand out worksheets to you, and you're going to do the worksheets. And often this is done just right in class, right? And so the worksheets are often small enough to finish within that time period. You receive very concise study guides over whatever the test is going to be. And then, of course, there's tests. Now, often what a teacher presents in class is not needed. See, this is something that becomes an issue. Some would say that everything the federal government touches makes it worse. Some don't agree with that, but some do. And I think if you talk to more, most K-12 teachers, they'll say, yeah, it was better before the feds got in and started messing with things. In any case, most of the time, the teacher is going to present information, but it's not needed because they need to make sure that you pass a test, that this information is building to a standardized test that the feds are going to look at, and they're going to base funding on whether or not you pass that test. So they're going to make sure that they've got study guides, and that those study guides are going to train you and bring you up in the way of knowledge so you can pass that test. So because of that, unfortunately, you spend a lot of time prepping for those standardized tests where we didn't used to. We always had standardized tests. They were always used to kind of gauge your school and gauge who you are, but the feds didn't basically say, we're not going to give you money if you don't have this percentage that's highly performing or whatever. So this situation really, unfortunately, often leads to memorizing and then dumping it. Now, what I mean is that students come in and they've got this concise study guide, and they study that, and they know they got to do well on the test. They go take the test, and now they go, okay, now I move on to the next thing. And it's a training of our brains. It's not something that the school is really meaning to teach. It's students basically saying, okay, so I passed that test. Now we're moving on to another one. So I no longer need this information. And especially as a teenager, right? You've been taught, we were all taught, oh, school is such a waste of time, even though that's not true, right? We're taught those kinds of things. So we think, I'm learning the stupid math, or I'm learning the stupid English, and it's not going to help me later. And it's just all a bunch of bogus stuff. And when we tell ourselves those things, then we study the study guide, do well on the test. And then if I asked you a question, 10 days later, you'd go, I don't know what that is, right? So it often leads to this memorize something and then dump it. I don't need this. I'm going to get rid of it. It's an unintended consequence. They don't mean to do that. They don't want students doing that, as a matter of fact. And some don't, right? There are a lot of students that they're good students and they spend a lot of time studying, and they have the frame of mind that I don't know where this is going to come in, but I probably will need this information someday. And so they don't put their mind in the same situation. They study to remember it for later. I'll try to remember as much of this as possible so that 4 or 5 years later, I still know what that is. And of course, that helps them. They get into college and they go much further, much quicker. Some of them take college classes as, in high school as a younger teen, because they have that attitude of, I need to remember this stuff. And of course, that's really the mode that we want to be in. However, because of the pressure of how this is done, let's just give you a worksheet and let's make sure you study that worksheet, and then you'll do well on that test. You don't really pay attention in class. I'm not taking notes, right? I'm going to get a worksheet later. I'll get a lecture, a concise study guide from the lecture, and I'll be good. It'll all be good. So I'm just going to sit in class and really not pay attention to what's going on and wish that I was just on my phone. Now, here's the college situation. Yes, still lecture. I hate to say it. It's much better if we can be more interactive in class, and teachers do try to ask questions like, hey, what about this and what about that? But when you're dealing with a huge amount of information you're trying to get across to anybody, lecture is used a lot because it's a really quick way to do it. Now, if you're taking classes fully online, you will learn the fact that, wow, I wish all my instructors would do videos and lectures that I could listen to, because at least it's trying to frame all this information I need to learn. And that's an important process, being able to say, hey, we're going to talk about the basics of networking, and here we go, enables people to be in the right frame of mind and to try to put those things together in their head. Right? Your brain doesn't remember things unless it can make connections. That's why, learning things through anagrams and all sorts of different methods, or putting it to a song or whatever, that helps because you're making connections. Anyway, back to this information. So yes, you deal with lecture. You deal with a lot more writing assignments. In other words, hey, I presented a bunch of information and now I want your thoughts on this. And of course, what the instructor's trying to get out of you is, I understood what I read, and I can see as an instructor that you did understand that by what your answer is. And so lots of times, even this part is not done well, because in high school, people just wait to the last minute to do something. So they think about it for like 10 minutes and then they do it. And the instructor's looking at it like, they left out like 18 things, Anyway, so there's writing assignments, which is very typical. You usually will get very large study guides. So if any instructor gives you a study guide, which I do not do, in my 103 class, 113, right, I'll have a big study guide for the final, that kind of thing. But in most of my classes, there's not a large study guide. It's the material's there and you need to learn the material. So go to the material in order to figure out what you need to do on a test. And then, of course, you have tests. Now, what a instructor presents in class then is needed, because the study guides are rare. And if a study guide is provided, it's really large and difficult to study. I remember going through some history courses that I had at EAC, and I learned really quick that I better listen in class, because the instructor is trying to frame it all and put it all into a context that will make sense. And that helped so much when I had to study basically a 24-page study guide in order to pass a test. That's so much information that it's hard for your brain to remember that stuff. So it's important watching this video, paying attention to it. And again, that's why I'm making you take notes that you can use on a quiz is so important. I'm trying to train you so that you can use these skills across any class that you take here and in university, and to be able to do better in the courses that I'm going to offer you, because there's a ton of information we go through in every single course. And if you're just sitting there in lecture, not really listening, then all of a sudden now it's time for a test. There's no study guide. I'm not giving you one. And so now you have to go through and try to figure out, how do I study all this information that I have and get that in my head? And so it's really important that whatever you're doing, the instructor is going to present and you should listen. Now, obviously that's not true in every class. I've had instructors and they sit and talk about their life and they talk about whatever. And you're like, man, you're wasting my time, because none of this is going to be on the test. Yeah, that happens. That does happen. But for the most part, good instructors are going to say, this is the information you're going to be tested over that you need to know in your career. So let's cover it. I'm going to try to help you figure out how it all fits. And then that way, when you go to study, it'll make more sense. Right? Colleges, and that's part of what comes into this, colleges are normally evaluated by the whole degree program, like many classes that you're taking, not just based on a course. Can you do this at this English level? That kind of thing. All right, so let's get into breaking down the differences. I will hit the highlights. In other words, hey, you need to come in here and take a look at this. You're going to see some things on the quiz that I'm probably not going to mention right here, right? So when you break down the differences, following the rules in high school is the important concept, and choosing responsibility in college is an important concept, right? So in high school, you follow the rules or you're kicked out, right? And high schools, they're mandatory, but they're usually free to you. Your time is very structured by somebody else. You can count on your parents and teachers to remind you, hey, that's coming up. Hey, that's coming up. You got to turn that in soon. That's going to be, you got, right. They're reminding you all the time of what you need to get done, when you need to have it done, and so on, right? Each day you proceed from course to course, right? You just go boom, 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 and then you're finally out, right? Most classes are arranged for you. I mean, I'm not even joking, right? When you're talking about dealing with my high school schedule, they say, hey, you got room for one elective this year. One elective, wow, thanks. That's cool, right? So in other words, they're all arranged. You have to go through those courses. They're trying to get you through them. That's what the feds have said they need to do, and so on. You are not responsible for knowing what it takes to graduate. Somebody else is taking care of that. Somebody else is going to tell you, you got to make up this math class because you didn't do really well on it, right? But over here in college, it's voluntary. You don't have to go to college, and it's expensive. It is much more expensive. And this is huge. This is where most students will fail. You have to manage your time. Nobody's blocking it out for you. Nobody's structuring it. That's why students in high school that actually take on the responsibility of managing their time and they study outside of school, even though they probably don't need to, do better in college because they're used to managing their time. I need to work on English this long. I need to work on computers this long. And they're already set for college. They know that I'm going to succeed if I manage my time. This is where most students fail. They basically, I want you to think about your schedule and think about what you do, what you hope to do, or if you've already been in college a little while, what you have done, right? So this is to me the typical student today. So this is the typical. I'm going to take a class at 10, 11, 12, and 1, or maybe not even 12. I might start at 9, right? But then my class is basically, that's my Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, and they're done. Then I'm going to go home and relax because it was really stressful sitting in that class. And then I'm going to play some games and I'll get on YouTube and watch some stuff and I'll take a look at TikTok and then I'll finally go to bed. And the only time I'm really going to study is when somebody says test coming up, because that's what I'm used to in high school. Right? Go home, I'm not really going to study. Now, some of you have it worse, right? Because you're like, college is important, it's very expensive, so I need to hold down a job at the same time. And then you're basically going from school to your job, and you have a lot less time to study. And when you get home, you're like, oh, what a day. That was terrible. So I just need a break. No study time for anything until somebody says there's going to be a test, and then you study for that. So the amount of time you're actually putting in on studying is very low, and that's a topic we get to in another video. So you got to manage your own time. You got to figure out these classes and go, how much time do I need to study? You have to balance your responsibilities, set your priorities. You'll actually face moral and ethical decisions you've never faced before because school just patterned everything for you. And then you often have hours between classes. You actually have time during the day that you could be studying. But since that's not what you would normally do, you don't do it. The good student, right, manages their time, looks and says, every day I need to be studying something from some course. And I actually have time to do that because I have a class at 9 and then another one at 11. So I've got an hour in there I can study. So I'll do that then, right? You arrange your own schedule. You consult with an advisor, but they're not there to do it for you. You have to figure that out. And then your graduation requirements are complex, and they often differ from year to year. And we get into education a few weeks from now and take a look at why did they do that? And you're expected to know what you need to do. That's why the first assignment I have you do, and we do talk about course sequencing later, but the first assignment I have you do is basically like, look at this course sequence. Are there any classes you should be in right now if you're interested in computers? And if there is, get in them so you don't have to make a whole nother year around before you can take that class, which really makes things difficult. All right, so Guiding principle, you will usually be told what to do and corrected if your behavior is out of line. For college, you'll be expected to take responsibility for what you do and what you don't do, as well as the consequences of your decisions. Oh, you haven't done any work and you have a D in the class. That's your fault. That's your problem. I can't and won't make up some large assignment for you to make up your score, which often happens in high school. I know because it happened with my kids. Oh, got an F in this class. Do these 3 things and you'll pass with a C. That's great. That's really great that they're helping students out like that, but that doesn't happen in college. Don't ever expect that to happen. All right, so when you look at how it's divided, I'm just going to hit the guiding principle here. Going to classes in high school and colleges, you will usually be told what class you need to learn from assigned readings. You'll be told that in class. It is up to you to read and understand the assignment material, lectures, assignments, proceed from the assumption that you've already done so. So in other words, when you come into class, I'm expecting that you already looked at the material for that week. Here, we're going to tell you what to do. We're going to tell you when that's going to happen and so on. So again, you got to take charge. You've got to realize that, oh, well, this isn't really based on a test, so I don't really need to read the chapter, right? That happens all the time in some very difficult courses I teach. And I can tell because the student does poorly very quick. And I will stand up in class and be like, hey, you got to study this stuff. You got to look at it. You got to do what you got to do, And so many students just don't know how that happens, how that works. So again, that's why I'm doing it in this course, trying to bridge that gap for you. All right, so teachers and professors. Teachers check your completed homework. Professors may not always check completed homework, but they will assume that you can perform the same tasks on the test. So in other words, they may give you an assignment, they may have you do that, and then the test is where they're actually going to score you based on that. So let's look at the guiding principle here. High school is a teaching environment in which you acquire facts and skills. And as I already said before, college is a learning environment in which you take responsibility for thinking through and applying what you learned. Right. So right here, professors expect you to think about and synthesize seemingly unrelated topics. And this drives students nuts. It really does. It's one of those situations where all of a sudden you get asked a question. They're like, oh, how am I supposed to know? And they write like students will write like a 4-word answer. And it's like, that's not synthesizing anything. You basically have these 2 topics that are related, and I expect you to reach out and figure out how they're related. What's usually missing is the groundwork. In other words, not really reading any information, kind of listening as the professor tells you things, and then you don't really know what to do. Again, this is important because when you go out and get a job, right, your boss is not going to sit there and explain everything to you, give you a study guide for how things work, test you over it, and then let you go do it. They're going to say, this is the end result of what we need from this. Go do it. And then you're going to have to go, okay, so they want this end result. What am I going to have to do in order to make that end result happen? And again, that's across the board, right? Maybe it's like, hey, we need to increase how many people buy our product that are between 18 and 24. That's a low sector. How do we do that? Or maybe we're not getting enough information from this office that's in a different state. And we've been trying to get them to tell us what's going on, and they're not. Go and solve it. Or in our situation, it might be, the network seems to be slow at certain given times. What is the problem, right? So you would have learned all this stuff in networking, and they would say, the network's always slow at this given time. Will you go solve that and fix it? Tell us what the problem is. They're not going to tell you, oh, that involves these 5 things. So look at these things in these programs. That doesn't happen. Otherwise, why did they hire you, right? All right, so teachers often take time to remind you of due dates. Professors expect you to read it. It's in the syllabus. I told you, it's right there in Canvas. It says when it's due, when it's going to close, right? You're intelligent. I don't need to stand up every single day, write it on the chalkboard, right? That kind of thing. All right, so tests. Let's take a look at the differences in tests. Guiding principle here is mastery is usually seen as the ability to reproduce what you were taught in the form in which it was presented to you, or solve the kinds of problems you were shown how to solve. In other words, it's very specific. That's what that's talking about. It's basically, I told you these definitions. I want you to write those definitions. I showed you how to do this problem. I want you to actually do that almost exactly the same, except I replaced the number 2 with a 7, right? That kind of thing. Where in college, mastery is often seen as the ability to apply what you've learned to new situations or to solve new kinds of problems. So just to give you an example of what you would be doing in this kind of course. In this kind of course, we're going to go through all these different websites and look at different degrees and the kinds of classes that are in them. And then I'm going to say, pick one of these. What university do you think you would like to go to? What program would you like to be a part of? That really what I'm going to be looking for in that assignment is somebody to be able to say, okay, well, he showed us how to go get information off of these websites. He showed us what was important about the different programs. So now I'm going to go and do that, and I'm going to answer this large question he's given me. And I'm going to use these facts that he showed me how to gather, right? It's much more big. All right, grades in high school as opposed to college. In high school, effort counts. That's just true. You know, that kid works really hard, right? Courses are usually structured to reward good faith effort. That means, again, James McBride works really hard. You know, the kid gets D's constantly. Look how hard he's working. So you may work hard enough to earn a C, but are awarded a B. That is a true fact. Some of you are aware